Hey everybody. I wanted to go through the timeline of poll closings for this upcoming election on Tuesday. Kind of just go through what the map might look like as we go forward hour by hour on election night. I've already been through what I think we'll know come the end of election night, based on all of the mail-ins and early votes that have to be counted. It won't be for a while that we know the definitive numbers of some states, and the state calls will be completely dependent on how close or how tight the results are that are coming in and are getting counted. For example, if a race is Joe Biden's by a long shot, even though we do not have some of the results, they will probably call that state. Whereas if a state, let's say like Florida, is very tight, even though they begin counting early voting ahead of the election, we still might not have the best idea who's going to win that state by the time election night is done. So with that being said, let's just go through it. First polls begin to close at 6 o'clock. I'm going through this Eastern time. They begin to close at 6 o'clock Eastern time, and that's in Indiana and Kentucky, but only on the eastern in their Eastern time zone districts. So we will not have a call to make in those two states yet. First calls we'll be able to make are at 7 o'clock Eastern, when polls close in Georgia, and they'll close and be too close to call in Georgia. Excuse me. Polls will also close in South Carolina, and that might be too close to call as well right away, or it could get called for Donald Trump. I do believe that will get called for Donald Trump right off the bat. Polls will close and be too close to call in Virginia, and polls will close in Vermont, and that will go to Joe Biden. Polls will also close, as I said, in Indiana and Kentucky now fully. Both states should get called for Donald Trump right off the bat. And in Florida, the polls on their Eastern time zone districts will also close, but we will not have the full state closed yet. So this is what we'll know come 7 o'clock, just about. We will have two states too close to call. Donald Trump will jump out to a 28-3 electoral college lead. And he should retain that lead until around 8 o'clock, when polls close on most of these Eastern Seaboard states. That will, especially these little ones here in the Northeast, that will go to Joe Biden. But let's move forward to 7:30, where polls will close in North Carolina, and it will be too close to call. Ohio, where it should also be too close to call. And West Virginia, which should go to Donald Trump. So here we are at 7:30. Now, let's say you wanted to sleep through the election and wake up at one time to see how everything is turning out. I think you better set your alarm for around 11, maybe 11:30 to be safe. That's when we should get some of these calls for states that I'm putting in yellow as too close to call. That's around when we got the calls back in 2016, or at least when the Associated Press made those calls. Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, those were all made either 20 minutes before or 20 minutes after 11 o'clock Eastern time. You want to play it really safe. I think if you wake up at midnight on November 4th, you probably have a good idea of how this map is filling out. Let's move forward to 8 o'clock, and this is going to be our first big block of votes coming through. We will have Alabama called for Donald Trump. We will have Connecticut called for Joe Biden. We will have Delaware and Illinois also called for Joe Biden. And actually, we will have most of these states here on the in the Northeast called. We will have Washington, D.C. called for Joe Biden, Maryland, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts as well. New Hampshire should be too close to call at this time. We will have as well some more Donald Trump states, including the states of Mississippi and Missouri, which will both go to Donald Trump, as well as the state of Tennessee, which could be too close to call right off the bat. But it should go to Donald Trump within a half hour to an hour or so. I'm not going to split those kinds of hairs because we'll be here all day. Oklahoma will go to Donald Trump, as well as, actually, that's it for now. The states of Florida, the state of Florida now will have its polls closed, and we will finally begin to get results from Florida. Polls in certain time zones in Michigan, as well as in the states of Kansas and North Dakota, South Dakota, and Texas, will also be closing at 8 o'clock, but we will not have results coming out of those states yet at 8. But come 8 o'clock, we will have results now, possibly significant results. So here's what you're looking for now, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Donald Trump and Joe Biden remotely tied in the electorate. We have results now coming out of North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, and Ohio for about an hour, and results coming out of Florida now for the first time. And what this will tell you is how each candidate is performing. Good news for Donald Trump will be if the state of Virginia is close or even in his column for the very beginning portion of its counting, because that's basically what it was back in 2016. Virginia looked like it was Trump's from the beginning. Obviously, that was before they started to count some of the bigger counties that went to Hillary Clinton, but that's basically what we're looking for in Virginia. If he gets out to that strong early lead, it should still eventually falter, and Joe Biden should take home Virginia, but at least it will look similar to 2016. If, on the other hand, Joe Biden is running away with Virginia, maybe we're looking at something completely different from back in 2016. We can also analyze results from Georgia and Ohio, where Donald Trump is hoping he's doing well at this point in the night at 8 o'clock. He's hoping results coming out of Ohio and Georgia are very positive, because we do expect North Carolina and Florida to be very, very tight. So states like Georgia and Ohio, which are expected to go to Trump at some point, would make him or make his camp breathe a sigh of relief if we see those states leaning significantly at this time in the night towards Donald Trump. At 8:30, the state of Arkansas will close and go to Donald Trump. At 9 o'clock, we have a very significant chunk of the electorate coming out. In the state of Arizona, it will be too close to call. In the state of Colorado, it should be too close to call as well. Kansas will close its polls and go to Donald Trump. Louisiana will close its polls and also go to Donald Trump. The state of Minnesota and Michigan will be too close to call. The state of New Mexico could be too close to call, but I do believe it will go to Joe Biden at some point in that. It should go close to that time. Again, a good sign for the Trump campaign if it is too close to call for more than an hour in New Mexico, because it would remind voters of 2016. In New York, Joe Biden will have a victory there. North and South Dakota should both go to Donald Trump automatically. Texas, unfortunately for the Trump campaign, I do believe it will be too close to call right when polls close. And in Wisconsin, polls will be too close to call as well. Wyoming will go to Donald Trump. So here we go, 9 o'clock on the East Coast. We will now have the most significant data I believe we'll need right now. We will not have declarations in those big points of contention, but we will start to get results out of the Rust Belt, which is big, very big. And by the way, I completely missed Pennsylvania, which would have been too close to call as well. I just forgot to mention it or color it in for that matter. And those polls closed at 8 o'clock. So did Maine, by the way. But Maine as well would be too close to call. Back to 9 o'clock now, we will have some significant data coming out of these states. Nebraska also, by the way, will be called and be too close to call, I believe, at least for the purposes of the video. So this is significant. We will be able to finally see what's happening in Texas, and if the Democrats are performing as well as they hope in Texas at this point, it will be troubling signs for the Trump campaign. However, if he begins to run away with numbers in Texas, it would be a good sign. We, again, should have better data now coming out of these eastern states, and our initial data coming out of the Rust Belt will be big as well. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, none of these will be bigger, in my opinion, than the data coming out of Arizona. We could see whether or not the Latino support for Donald Trump in Arizona is something, or the Latino support across the board is true based on the Latino support he's getting in Arizona, and see if that's enough support to overcome some other deficiencies he's had in polling, such as his polling with the age group 65 and up. On to 11 o'clock, where we will now start, 10 o'clock, where we will have results now coming from the Midwest at a stronger pace. Iowa will be too close to call. Montana should go to Donald Trump. Utah should go to Donald Trump. Nevada should be too close to call, and again, we will get some indication here. If it's called right off the bat, I don't believe it will be called right off the bat anyway, but if it's called within an hour or maybe an hour and a half for Joe Biden, or if polls are not as close, or if ballots are not as close as the polls have indicated it should be, that would be a good sign for Joe Biden if he's performing well in Nevada and Arizona, as well as Colorado and New Mexico. The states of Idaho and Oregon are closing in some of their districts, but not all of them. Now we come to 11 o'clock. Now, first at 11 o'clock, California will go to Joe Biden, as well as Oregon and Washington State, while Idaho will go to Donald Trump. Now, I believe we will have some calls coming out of these main states. I believe we will have calls coming out of Maine, where Joe Biden should take Maine's first congressional district, as well as its 2 at-large electoral college votes. Joe Biden should take the state of New Hampshire. He should take the state by now of Virginia. And again, if he hasn't by now, that would be a good sign for the Trump campaign. Keeping it on the East Coast for Donald Trump, he should by now have the states of Georgia and Ohio declared for him. And if he does not, that is a troubling sign for the Trump campaign. For purposes of this video, I'm going to give him as well Maine's 2nd congressional district, just to take that out of the picture for now. I'm leaving Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida as too close to call. I will do that as well for the entirety of the Rust Belt. Good sign for Joe Biden if by 11 o'clock they declare Minnesota for him, but I believe it might still be too close to call just based on how tight polls have gotten in Minnesota. In Iowa, that state should by now be Donald Trump's, and if it is not, it will be a very troubling sign for the Trump campaign. Nebraska should be going to Donald Trump, with the exception of its 2nd congressional district, which would be going now to Joe Biden for the purposes of this video, just to get it out of the way. Texas could still be too close to call, but again, for our purposes, let's assume it's been called now to Donald Trump, which would be a positive sign. I think Texas goes to Trump no matter what. That does not matter. What matters is the margin of victory in Texas, and that's going to be a big indicator of how well the Trump campaign or the Biden campaign is doing so far. Joe Biden should by now have Colorado and the state of Nevada even, but I'm going to leave Nevada as too close to call, as well as Arizona. But a good sign for Joe Biden if he runs away with the state of New Mexico and does very well in the state of Colorado, that he should be able to pull it off in Nevada and possibly flip Arizona. However, if Colorado is still too close to call, I would be on the lookout for Nevada. And I would be very hopeful about Arizona if I were the Trump camp. Now, come midnight and then 1 a.m., that's when we'll get our final calls. Hawaii will go to Joe Biden. Alaska will go to Donald Trump. And now we are left with the main battleground still having yet to call. We have Joe Biden up to a 217 to 204 lead over Donald Trump. And that is assuming the state of Florida is still too close to call. I do believe we will get a call for Florida in favor of Donald Trump, as well as in North Carolina. And again, I believe that no matter what, I'm more optimistic for Florida in favor of Donald Trump than I am for North Carolina. But again, a win in Florida for Donald Trump is a big deal, obviously, but you also would need to look at his margin of victory in Florida, because that could indicate how well or how poor he has performed, even if he wins in the state of Florida. If he doesn't win the state of North Carolina, that would be a tremendous blow for his campaign. So there you go. I think this is how we will see the map come around 11:30 or midnight on November 3rd into November 4th. Donald Trump, assuming he has these two states, will have a 248 to 217 lead over Joe Biden. We will be looking heavily at the results coming out of Pennsylvania, Arizona, and then additionally the rest of the Rust Belt and Nevada to see how they are performing. This could very well be a case where if one candidate or the other is performing very well in Arizona and Pennsylvania, that we might have more calls along the Rust Belt or in the Sun Belt area of the country before midnight. But again, I think that this is a conservative bet here. I even think to be even more conservative, I'd say we might not even have a North Carolina call by midnight, depending on how close it is, maybe not even in Florida. But just judging them by what I've seen so far, I think we will at least have Florida, meaning we will have 88 votes still at large in this election. And that's assuming, of course, Nebraska's second and Maine's second congressional districts have been declared already. Assuming they are also still close to call, we could have as many as 90. And again, if Florida is still at large, as much as 119, possibly even more than that, depending on how tight the race is in different states. But conservatively speaking, I think we're looking at nearly 100 electoral college votes still at large by midnight. So that is by no means to say we won't have reason to panic or celebrate by which candidate or one candidate or the other's camp will be panicking or celebrating at this time. Depending on how results look in these states that are still too close to call, just because it's too close to call doesn't mean we don't know where it's going to go. So I do think we will have some significant. I know that this is a lot of too close to call. This is a lot of yellow on the map for midnight on November 4th, but that by no means tells me that we won't know just about who will be the president come November 4th later in that day. So I do think that just because you see a lot of yellow and a lot of too close to call states, that doesn't mean we won't have results and have meaningful results coming out of those states. That's all for this video. Thanks, guys.